Joining me now via Skype is the Chairman, National Polioplus Committee, Rotary International, Dr. Tunji Funsho. Dr. Funsho, it's good to have you join me this morning. Now, if we focus on the issue of making vaccines available, how challenging, just give us a picture of how challenging it is to produce a vaccine for a pandemic like this.
The challenges are enormous. The first thing to appreciate is the fact that normally vaccines take between 3 to 10 years to develop because of the need, number one, to ensure that they are safe, and number two, to ensure that they will be efficient to carry out the task they are supposed to do. And they're also very expensive. Most vaccines in these days, by the time they get to the market, will cost between $500 million and $1 billion US. So those are major challenges. In the times we are now, because of new technology, it's easy to fast track the production of a vaccine and getting that vaccine to use within 12 to 18 months. I think this is going to be the first time that will happen. Ordinarily, this will have taken much longer period of time.
Okay. Now,
so those are challenges.
Okay. Now, in Nigeria alone, we have not less than about 5 or 6 persons who have come out to say they've had a breakthrough one way or the other. But one of the biggest news on the front burner, the stories on the front burner is the story from Madagascar, where we hear the country has adopted a herbal drink for all citizens. Now, make us understand, all of these are still trials and they have all not been adopted. Medical experts are saying they should be careful in adopting all of those drugs here and there. But what is the protocol? What does it go through for a drug to be approved for use in that regard?
I think we should make a distinction now between curative medications that we actually use for treating sick patients and preventive measures, which is what vaccines are. Predominantly, I think what we're looking at in the case of Madagascar is using local herbs. One should not deride that because we know that some naturally known herbs, the popular ones amongst them being ginger, for instance, are quite toxic to viruses. But, the point, where you raise is very important. What do these things go through? Before a drug can be approved, for general use and consumption, you must first of all test that this drug is efficient in animals. Animals will undergo 2 trials. The first trial is to ensure that the drug is safe. The second trial is to make sure that it's efficient. That is when you check what dose will actually stimulate the body's immune response. It's only after that stage that a license will be issued for the clinical trials in humans. And again, you have to go through the stage of testing for lack of toxicity. In other words, that it's not going to do any harm. And then you go to the next phase of the clinical trial, which is checking that it is efficient. In other words, it will provide immunity for humans, and then titrate the dose to find what is the dose of the vaccine that will be able to generate the kind of immune response in the person to keep them protected if they come in contact with these germs, whatever they are, whether you developing a vaccine for a bacteria or for a virus. And this does take a very long period of time.
All right. Now, we're hearing that a likely vaccine, in fact, we've heard from different authorities across the world. Some say a vaccine can be available in 2021. Others are saying the vaccine can be available by the end of the year. And well, we all know that the researches are going on in different parts of the world. But what do you foresee as a medical expert? What are your projections? What scenarios can play out?
Well, I think the first thing that people should appreciate is that the mortality rate, in other words, the tendency for vaccines under research to turn out not to be useful is very, very high indeed, much more than 50%. So a lot of, what we call candidate vaccines at the moment that are undergoing different phases of the trial may turn out not to be effective or useful either because, they lead to side effects when you do the clinical trials in humans, or, because they actually do not provoke enough immune response to protect people. So quite a large number of these vaccines are going to fall by the wayside. That's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is to bear in mind the sheer volume of the vaccines that will be required in this particular instance. Most of the previous vaccines that we've been using, polio, for instance, is below the age of 5. The flu vaccine mostly is for older people. Some of the childhood diseases like diphtheria, tetanus, whooping cough, meningitis are usually, for younger people, though meningitis also are used in older people, and booster doses. The volume of vaccines required, even for those, is quite high, and sometimes we run short. Now imagine a scenario where literally every age group needs to be covered and the whole world needs to be covered. That is going to pose another humongous challenge. Even after an effective vaccine had been found and production starts, it places a lot of burden on the production capacity of whichever company comes to the market first with an approved vaccine.
All right. As it is right now, no known cure, no vaccine available for now yet. But for those who have come down with or who tested positive for the coronavirus, some are getting well, others are not getting well from the reports we're hearing and the records we're seeing. But what would be the advice for any average person who has COVID-19 and lying down on the bed somewhere, either in the hospital or at an isolation center right now?
Well, I think the first thing in any, ailment, the first thing is the mind. People should make up their mind to get better. The mind is a very, very strong tool in medicine. And if you make up your mind that you're going to get out from this, you're almost 50% there. It makes your medications more efficacious. It makes you more amenable to listen to the advice of your caregivers, particularly with the COVID-19. What we know and hear is that you shouldn't just lie down there because that is what the disease wants you to do. You should, as much as possible, get up and move around because, number one, it will help to remove the tendency for the infection to settle in your lungs, but also to improve your circulation. So whatever immune bodies you have circulating in your system, will more efficacious and, as a matter of fact, maybe even more stimulated. So people should just not lie down and allow the disease, to permeate their bodies.
All right, Dr. Tunji Funsho, thank you so much for your advice and your insight this morning. Thank you very much. Joining me on Skype now is the Chairman, National Polioplus Committee, Rotary International, Dr. Tunji Funsho. Dr. Funsho, it's good to have you join me this morning. Let me start with one elementary question about face masks. Now, the authorities and health experts have advised that everyone uses a face mask. In fact, it is now a mandatory accessory to use in parts of the country right now. But health experts are saying that prolonged use of face masks can also lead to fatigue since it covers your nose and then you're breathing in carbon dioxide. Talk to us about how to use the face mask first before we go into the issue of the vaccine.
I think, the issue of face mask, there should be no controversy there. Most of the health experts will agree that the normal face mask, whether it is the surgical mask or the cloth mask, allow air to go in and out. So the issue of buildup of carbon dioxide is just something that somebody thought about and thought they should, bring out there. That has not been proven at all. And the average person who, let me give you an example. Surgeons in the theater will be operating for sometimes 3, 4, 5 hours with their face masks, doing very major complicated surgery. Now, if it causes some of those symptoms that were referred to, like fatigue, dizziness, and some even said collapse, why would that have been possible? So that is just a myth. There's no truth in that whatsoever. Your masks, if it's a good mask, will allow you to breathe in and out normally. It is uncomfortable to wear because we're not used to it. But it does not cause any harm whatsoever. In fact, it is quite protective. If everybody wears a mask, I am preventing you getting anything that I may have, and you are preventing me getting anything that you may have. And that is why it is important for everyone to wear a mask, because that way we're all protected. It's just part of the tool that has been deployed against the spread of the coronavirus. The most fundamental one, I always say, if you can afford it, is to stay at home. That is the best protection you can give yourself and other people as well.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. Now, let's get to the issue of vaccine. Some people who caught the virus are getting well and others are not. But when they lie in the hospital and doctors are attending to them, a lot of questions go out there as to what are doctors giving to people that some are getting well and others are not. But let's come to the issue of, for instance, here, let me narrow it down to Nigeria. For those who have reported a breakthrough of having maybe a cure or a vaccine for it, what are the protocols that are adopted to have their claim tested for use on anyone, since we are on the trial level?
Well, I don't know about any vaccines under trial that are homegrown in Nigeria, if that is what you're talking about. I'm aware that Nigeria has agreed to participate in a vaccine trial through the WHO. That has not started as yet. Most of the vaccines are in their stage 1 and stage 2 clinical trials. Seattle actually is not the first to start testing vaccines. I think the first phase clinical trials actually started in China, by a company called, CanSino. They're actually at the phase 2 trial phase at the moment. It's a huge rush, to get the first vaccine out. So we don't have that. But the phases, as I mentioned earlier, is a long process. You have to do animal testing. Unfortunately, most of the candidates for vaccine this time are not using the animal phase testing because of the need to quickly bring out this vaccine. And I can see some difficulties ahead as a result of that. And so human trials have started in some cases without, trials in animals, which gives us at least a head start in case there are going to be any deleterious effect of the vaccine. We must also understand that this is a race that is not only about health, it's also about money, because there's a lot of money to be made for the first company that rolls out a vaccine anywhere in the world. And therefore, there is the propensity, for companies to jostle and seek approvals and seek waivers so that, they can quickly get their vaccines onto the market. We must bear that in mind.
All right. Now, what is the place of chloroquine that has been on the news in the past few weeks when it comes to using it as a trial as well? What is the place of that now? In fact, we had heard reports of a lot of people, having an overdose of chloroquine just because the heard on the news that some leaders had talked about or mentioned chloroquine as a cure?
I think, fundamentally, people should be very cautious of any drug that has not been approved by the experts for a particular illness. Chloroquine is a great drug. It is still being used for treatment of malaria in some parts of the world, though the species in Nigeria, is chloroquine resistant. That is why we have the combination therapy. So chloroquine is a great drug. It's still being used, apart from malaria, it's still being used for other diseases, particularly what we call autoimmune disease, which are diseases that are caused by, excessive activity of the body's immune system, like rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, is one of them. Lupus is another one. So it is out there. It is still a very useful drug. But none of the trials, that have been reviewed by experts have shown it to have any major advantage in the treatment of COVID-19. As I mentioned earlier, one of the first things you must ensure when you're trying a drug for a particular disease or even a vaccine is that it does not cause any harm. Most of the trials, have shown that chloroquine can cause harm in patients with COVID-19, particularly issues that are related, to abnormal heart rhythms, which can be very life-threatening. So as of now, chloroquine is no more touted as a candidate. The major drug that is being touted is an antiviral agent that in fact, the American government on the 1st of May has given I think it's their drug, their NAFDAC equivalent, has given approval for it to be used in hospitals. I've forgotten the name of the drug now. And that is another drug that may, have some effect, but, the statistics don't convince me. But like most things, this is the first one that, people have shown to reduce the number of stay in hospital, but it doesn't actually significantly reduce the mortality. In other words, the statistic doesn't show that it can prevent people from dying from serious disease.
Okay.
But it is worth trying. And like most diseases of this nature, just one drug will not be adequate, to get people well.
Okay. All right. Now, before I let you go, the lockdown in Lagos and Abuja and Ogun State from today is beginning to ease just a little bit from the authorities, what the authorities are saying. And we see this morning already, a lot of people have gone out, after the lockdown, after staying home for so long. Health experts, some, at least from what we have heard, some are saying that it's quite early to begin to ease the restrictions because it will undo all the gains in the containment of the spread of COVID-19. What do you say?
I think all of us must agree that, the lockdown was being observed in most areas in default. It's only in the center of the cities, that there's a major control and there's much less traffic. But if you go to satellite areas of every city, business is going on as usual. In the environment where I live, the market that is very close to me here in Jakonde is business as usual, even throughout the lockdown. So we must appreciate the fact that we've not been in total lockdown. And this phase lockdown with this proviso, that everybody wears a face mask, I think is going to go a long way. It is going to be very difficult to keep everybody at home, but it is much easier to communicate with people in the language they can understand so that they wear masks, keep safe distances as much as possible. I don't see how that is possible in a market environment, but if you're wearing a mask, you have reduced your risks drastically. And of course, I just checked, the traffic in most parts of Lagos today is not the usual traffic you find on Mondays, because a lot of people, have learned to stay at home if they don't have to. Those are the things we need to preach. I was quite, taken in by the expression your last guest, said it is a decision between lives and livelihoods. I think, it's a delicate balance, that we need, to ensure, we take into consideration.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Tunji Funsho, for your time on the program. We really appreciate it.